Hey everyone, welcome to this session of Remembering John Pierrakos. I'm very happy to have with us today Charles Corley, who's a senior faculty member. He's taught all over the world. He's taught in New York for the longest perhaps, but Charlie, you're one of these guys that's been around, man. Welcome and thanks for coming along today.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Oh, thanks so much. Well, mate, as you know, we all have great fond memories of John, and it's such an important year. I'm curious, how did you meet John? How did you find this work? What got you started?
Well, what got me started was before I met John, I did the path work, and I did the path work program for 3 years, and I loved the lectures. And Stuart Black, basically, when I was done with the third year, my choice was either become a helper or core energetics therapist, right? I have a master's in counseling, and so Stuart suggested I do core, and he also, and then I did John's workshop.
Yeah.
And that's how I met John. I at the path work, he had probably about 50, 60 people.
Yeah.
And I met John in that workshop. And I was one of the first people to work in his workshop. And he said, he had us in our underwear, which is so different than now, right? And my balls was sticking out, and he made a comment like, and we had women in there, my balls are sticking out. And he said, my God, this energy work is right up your alley. And that's how I met you.
Hey, that's fantastic. Hey, if you feel comfortable, mate, how did that workshop go? I mean, what was your experience in working with John?
I loved it. He said to me, you have like a mask, and I remember him saying you need to work on your eyes and open up your eyes, and I just I knew the energy work from the path work. Okay. Yes. So I knew that. And when I met John and I had a connection right from the get. Right? Yeah. And when I interviewed with John for the program, he said to me, this work is right up your alley. And I kind of knew it because I knew that the energy work and my spirituality and the path work and the core and John was from Greece, right? And so my grandparents from my mother's side were both from the island of Rhodes. Okay.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
So there was the connection there as well, culturally, with John.
Yeah. And John was John was a complex man, right? And I got to meet John up front because I when I went into private practice full time, John convinced me to go to 23rd Street. So 23rd Street, that's where I did my program. Okay.
And for our viewers out there who don't know what 23rd Street is, do you want to give us a bit of insight on that?
Yeah. So 23rd Street was where, so John had the 12th floor, had 8 offices and a big group room. And that's where we did our programs. So the way the program was built, 9 months every month you did a weekend in the program. Today, there's 5 modules, you go 4 days. With John, you went every weekend.
Yep.
And so when John died, okay, I had my private practice there. It was 2001. I had gone to full-time private practice in 1998, and I rented room 2 on the 12th floor. And when Cynthia Schwartzberg knocked on my door, and I was in a session with a core energetic student, knocked on my door and said, listen, John died.
Oh man.
And so me and the student cried for the whole session, and I had seen John 4 days before.
Wow.
Okay. And I walked him to the elevator, and he was really down and depressed because of the financial status he was in, and what happened. And 4 days later, they found his body. The cleaning woman came in, and
Yeah, very sad. Yeah, that's right, because he had some problems with the tax guys over there, didn't he?
well, he had problems with Carlos. So what John was, and here's the thing: when John died, Stuart Black came to me and two other people. He left a message on my machine saying, "Listen, would you take over the 23rd floor, right? But we'd like you to run it, okay?"
Yeah.
So I formed with two other people, 23rd Street, and basically, the one woman resigned after a year. The other one died of cancer, and I basically ran it for 14 years.
Wow.
23rd. Right?
So the momentum of that premises, of that office, really you maintained and evolved into the next generation, didn't you, after John?
Yes, and the truth is, when we had to give it up because they raised the rent from $14,000 to $27,000. Okay,
Wow.
Yeah, and so that was really John. Between me and John, it was probably 36 years that we were in that place, and that's where we did the programs until they lost the pathwork, where we did our intensives in June.
Yeah.
So then we went to Port Jervis, and that's when Stuart Black brought in the community of living together in the community, and went on to modules, and the whole model changed.
Yeah. So how did you find, so you had a couple of different relationships there with John.
Yes,
did you also work with him in private therapy, or was it just
I did. No,
Okay.
I did. I did a year and a half with John.
Yeah.
Right. The problem with John in working with him, he was horrible at keeping time. And I'm on time, right? And I schedule my life on time. John, keep you waiting an hour, half an hour, 45 minutes.
Yeah.
We just go over. And then, so finally I said, John, I can't do this anymore. I cannot work with you anymore. I cannot, you can't keep me going 45 minutes late. And so I ended it. But he was great. The one thing I never forget, that I came into for a session. So he said, "So what's up? What's up?" And and I said, "Well, this, and this." No, mask. And I said, and he goes, "Tell me what is good about your life."
Yeah.
And then he told me a really thing that I kept on. It's looking for the higher self, that part of you that not, because this work and this kind of field, it lends towards the wound and the victim and how bad your life is, and you go in there, and John had nothing of that, but he also had a way of, like, I remember one session he had me had me with the mirror, and he had, it's like you were into a socket, the electric socket, right?
Yeah.
The energy that he could get you in there. He had a great heart, and then he could also be really rough on you too.
Yeah. Look, by the time we met him, he'd settled down a lot, but I heard all of the stories of how he was a bit of a nutcracker at times as well. Hey, and I'd imagine with that, I guess that synergy he felt with you, with your history and stuff, he'd be pretty direct as well, and even full on.
Oh yeah, he was real direct with me, and to be honest with you, a couple of times I told him to go to hell, right? And you know, you know, there was one time I fell asleep in his class at the path work, right?
Yeah.
And John was great at working with you, but his teaching, he was either good or he put me to sleep. And he came up to me and he was screaming, and I said, "Move back!"
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And then I just kind of just went to, I kind of went inside. And then when the class was done, I went outside and he came walking towards me and he says, "Listen, I want to apologize."
Yeah.
So he had the ability to really, he was very stubborn and he was very, this is the way it should be. And I remember he talking about kids and how they should be, disciplined and this, right? But he also, so I'll tell you, when I got separated in 2000, and I basically shared the pain wasn't as much with separating. I got separated from my daughter, who was 5 years old at that time.
Oh, yes.
And I told, and so it was a take a risk night, and I went up there and shared. It was just really, I got separated in the end of May. The program was June, okay, and I shared with this, and I broke down, and the next day we were in the spiritual substance. I was sitting next to John, and he grabs my hand, and he says, "You got to get rid of the poison."
Mm.
And I said, "Yeah, I know, John. You're right." Yeah. So, he also had, he could be really, what's the word, ruthless. He could be really come at you in a way, and sometimes he was right on. But sometimes he really, he had a concept, and sometimes that concept didn't fit the person he was with, and he didn't have the relationship. But he also knew. I remember take a risk night, and he said to Stuart, I was working with somebody, and he said to find out what the root of this woman's anger. So he had brilliance, and he also had his flaws too.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing that, because I mean, of course, he's only a human like the rest of us, and we saw so many beautiful things about him. But nice to hear about some of the parts where he wasn't quite as insightful in the moment with that person, because I'm sure the insights he had were relevant. It's just that what's there in front of him at that time too, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, he had like rage inside him too, like we all do, right?
Yeah.
And he was a real supporter of me. And so in my 5th year, he was teaching, and he had me get on the roller, and I had never been on the roller. And he started, "What do you mean you don't know how to get on the roller?" I said, "This is the first time I've ever been on the roller, and I don't like how you're speaking to me on that." Actually, and he again, I was one of the few that would go after him. Let me put it this way, But we had that kind of, that's why he liked me, because, what I learned, in this field is that leaders want you to be who you are, and especially in this work, okay? But, it takes a lot of working on yourself and courage to speak up.
Absolutely. So if you could, with all of this vast experience you had with John, man, if you can think of a few things that really stand out and have stayed with you from what you learned from John, either as a teacher or as a therapist or as a man, what would some of these things be?
Well, I think I learned John, John would teach us a master class on Sunday.
Yeah.
And what I learned from John was, it is about, which I teach, which when I'm going to Greece, I'm teaching an intro weekend. It's about connecting with that person's heart. It's about the love you have inside and your willingness to see the other person, right? And be there as in their corner for, be there because this is your passion and this is your love. And John had an incredible passion for this work. I remember I had done a faculty, an intensive with Stuart Black, and he would, and I had an incredible, profound experience. It's like I felt like I went into a new vista in myself. In that weekend, I really helped this woman with 2 other people really come out in this intensive. And I remember on that Friday, we had the program, and John would be with us, with me and a number of people on Friday night, and we would talk about things. And I remember sharing my experiences, and John was so tuned into what I was saying. He knew about growth, and he knew about life, and he knew about why we're in this work. And I think that was his real gift that he shared, that his heart was huge. And in that, he had his own stuff, okay? But ultimately, he was the one that said, you see the higher self. You don't get caught up in, and in his book, he actually says it. It's about the higher self. It's not about the mask to the lower self or the character structures. And the trap with cornergetics, especially new students, the character structures are like, they seduce you, and it's like you think that's who you are, and so many people get kind of, oh, are you an oral? Are you a schizoid? And John never really, he knew him, but then he let him go.
Yeah, that's the art beyond the science, isn't it? That's the spirituality and the art.
Yeah. So the work is really, and so John could when John was in a group, he knew the science. He was a psychiatrist. He knew the science, right? And he talked in those terms, but I think he loved my Brooklyn kind of, way
Energy.
of energy and of seeing things. And so, it's like, it's really about trusting yourself and knowing your intention and wanting to help somebody, and not running somebody over, okay? Or thinking. So here's what John brought on his good days: humility, and he was willing to say he was wrong and apologize.
Yeah.
And I know a story from a woman in Mexico who told me that John, she realized she was married, and she realized she was gay, and she told John that she was leaving her husband, and she was and I was driving in Corley, and she's telling me, this was after I worked in Mexico for the 4 days, and she's telling me that she, John, I said, you can't be in court if you're gay.
Yeah.
And then she wrote him back. And then she told me, he wrote her back and he said, you were right. I'm wrong here. I'm old school, but I'm wrong. So John had the ability to say he's wrong.
And see the truth, yeah?
And see the truth.
Yeah.
And, like all of us, sometimes somebody hits us and we don't want to see the truth, and we get defensive and we fight, but it's really about stepping back from your reaction and saying, what is the truth of the matter here?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's so beautiful. And, you know, I mean, I can see how he liked you. I love this Brooklyn energy you bring. And this must be such a wonderful teaching aid as well. I mean, to many of the students, to get it so straight and so unpolished, you know. I mean, I love this. Yeah, yeah. You're obviously a talented man, but your message is so clear and direct.
What students have told me over the years is I meet them where they are.
Yeah.
You know, but I want to say too, and this is where I think is, you don't change somebody by technique. You help somebody change by you keep on growing and you being more and more your authentic self, not a think how you should be or try to be, right? You know, and 30 years, you know, and so, and I, you know, I went away from this field for 16 years.
Yes. Wow.
You know?
What were you doing in the time?
Well, before I came back into this field, I was a director of marketing for Rank Corporation, which, you know, and at that time I was doing the path work, but I had also worked in the family business. I created 20 shows on ESPN. I was an actor, you know, I was a salesman, right? I went from my master's of tremendous growth to, I was thinking today, I basically, you know, I basically did my internship at an alternative high school, and I had incredible experience with this one student that was 17 years old, smoking pot, and she, the first session with me that I had, she asked me if she could leave when she was stoned. I said, I'm not going to let you leave, but you can just sit here with me. And we just talked, and what it told me was, and she really changed, okay? And that year she was truant, she was not going to school, and she not only changed, but she got into college, and it was my master's program, and I knew, but I didn't get the job, and I was really hurt that I didn't get the job, you know? In a way, my first real job after my master's was in a methadone clinic, okay? And I was so glad. I looking back, I'm thinking, maybe that was really good, because then I went on to work, to be a salesman selling copiers. Then I went out to California to be an actor, you know, and then I came back to this field. Right.
So it gave you a broader experience in life with this growth that you'd had, to then bring it back to, you know, I've got to say, I hear you speak, and it's obvious this is a passion and a life purpose for you. So, wow, what a great story. And I can see why you and Stuart got on so well too. There's a lot of similarities, aren't there?
Oh yeah. Stu and he was my supervisor, and he relied on me as one of the senior teachers. And so I have somebody who I work with, and he said to me, so Stuart do take a risk, and he could be brutal too, okay? And so he did take a risk with it, and this person who I'm starting to work with now said to me there was a take a risk, and he got up there, and nobody, and Stuart was doing it, and nobody stood up for him. There was only one person that stood up for me that night, and that was you, Charlie. I said to Stuart, you're out of line here, Stuart. You know?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's important. And as you say, finding that inner truth and that voice, you know, that courage to be who you are in those tough moments, that's really, I guess, defines us as people in the world, doesn't it?
Well, it's easy when you're winning, right? It's easy when everything's going your way. Okay, so you know, and it's like I tell you, I did my 5th year project called Twins Coming Home,
Yeah.
you know,
Mm.
and it's a 15-page, it's in my website. My website is charlescorley.com, right?
Wonderful. I'll put it in the YouTube in the notes so everyone can get that. That'll be really cool to read that.
And in there is my paper on twins coming home.
Yeah.
Okay. And it was I was an identical twin, and I wrote it through the framework of core for the mass, low self, and higher self. Okay.
Yeah.
And when I read my paper, nobody was moving after I got done with it, right?
Wow.
And Stuart called me, left a message saying, I really love this paper, right? So,
Yeah.
so this is a passion of mine. And I went through a lot of stuff to find that I think I was afraid of really committing to something, this kind of work.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a big step, isn't it? Given your history of what careers you used to do.
Yeah.
So terrific. And what was John's view on that? You're coming in and out, and
Well, he met me. So again, he met me after 16 years. So here's what happened. I got fired from rank, but I had so a woman from the Pathwork. So I met my wife at the Pathwork. Okay.
Yeah.
And this woman who saw me at the Pathwork work with the kids there, okay, wrote me a letter and said, listen, I think you need to really work with people and kids and go back to your field, because that's really, I think, your gift here. And she wrote me a letter, not solicited, she sent it to me, and
amazing.
and I had started to saying, I'm getting out of this job. I didn't like it. It wasn't really, and I had been doing the Pathwork for 3 years.
Yeah.
And I also was doing acting, right? And so I got fired on Labor Day here in New York. I said to my girlfriend, my wife to be, she goes, there's a Federal Express package here. I said, open it up. And it said, you've got 2 weeks, you're done at the job, okay? Ooh. And then I was fired, and I had started core. I was starting core in September, okay? Right. So right? And so then I went after going back in the field, and it took me 4 months to get a clinical counseling job in downstate hospital. And then,
and then away you went from there.
Away I went. Then so then I was all in a way. I was all in. And then when I made the decision, I was a guidance counselor in the city schools, in 1998, and they had they were placing me in a permanent place in the school system. But I had 12, 13, 14 clients, and that decision to go full time into my private practice, right? Which really, if I was working in the school system, I would never been able to travel, go and do the program the way I have done.
Yes, and to teach everywhere. Yeah.
And here's the thing, you have to be willing to risk and change and go with your gut.
So beautiful. So beautiful. Yeah. And, what can I say, Charlie? I everything you're describing there, I really saw John do a lot of. And you were talking about it earlier, weren't you? He was so with what was his truth and intuition.
Well, he was going around he created core around the world. I have talked to, because when I was in 23rd Street, the board of core around the world, they would come to 23rd Street. And so I would talk to them, and there was a lot of politics and all that. Everybody was jealous, and, it was crazy. But John created this. Wherever he went, he had charisma, and he dressed with those colorful ties, and and he thought everybody should serve him in a way, and where he came from, but he created it around he traveled. That was his life. But I want to say something too, and John said it in one of his, when he was teaching us, you can't make this just that. You can't think that your clients is going to fulfill all your needs.
Yeah, so it's important to understand what our own needs are and make sure we fill ourselves and take that into the world.
Yeah.
I remember him talking about, filling his cup. He was always saying, you got to fill your cup and then go out.
Yeah. His love of life was Eva. Okay.
Yeah.
And
something else, eh?
that's another story, Eva.
I think you and I should have another session talking about John and Eva another day, because that'll be pretty cool.
Yeah. Yes.
All right. Hey, listen, man. Thank you so much for sharing your memories about John and of your own journey and what you've learned. Oh, actually, one other question, if I can ask you. So we've just been through a really weird patch, and you've been doing a lot of the online teaching to the different institutes. But in the work you do now, in the way that you're putting back in with your knowledge and your teaching style, what do you think is the biggest thing of John that comes through in what you're doing now?
I think meeting the students, seeing, but willing to confront. Okay, willing to kind of help the other in a way that they might not want to hear it. John said to me that they come in and they're going to want to show you the mask and be in the mask. Okay, and they will come there, like they will fight like a tiger, not to show that heart or vulnerable part because of their defense and where they are. Okay, so I think what I took from him is how to dance with, connecting with them, meeting them, and at the same time challenging them.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, man. All right, Charles. Thanks for your time. We will chat again some more. I think we've got lots of stories we can pull out of you, my friend.
Okay.
All right. We'll see you soon.
See you soon.
Take care.